Hello, true crime family. You guys are not going to believe this one. I fell down a rabbit hole last night researching 90s crimes in Georgia, and I found a case that actually made my skin crawl. It's called the Miller family homicide. It starts with a 911 call that sounds like every dispatcher's worst nightmare. A wife screaming, gunshots, a dead husband. It looked like self-defense. It sounded like self-defense. But there was a 7-minute gap in the timeline that revealed a monster hiding in plain sight. And it wasn't the person holding the gun. Well, not in the way you think. Let's talk about the Blue Hour on Sycamore Ridge. Location, Briarwood, Georgia. Date, November 14, 1998. Subject, the Miller family homicide. In Briarwood, Georgia, the darkness doesn't fall. It rises from the swampy creeks and settles heavy into the pines. By 5:30 p.m. in November, the sun is a bruised purple memory behind the water tower. By 6:30 p.m., the only light on Sycamore Ridge usually comes from the yellow glow of porch lanterns on the sprawling colonial houses that line the golf course. But on November 14, 1998, the ridge was lit by a strobe light chaotic ballet of red and blue. The neighbors, peering through plantation shutters and standing in huddled, shivering groups in their robes, knew the house. Everyone knew the house. It was the Miller residence. 4,500 square feet of white brick, black shutters, and a wraparound porch that had been featured in the local paper's Sunday Living section 3 years prior. They knew the family inside too. Brandon Miller, the former high school quarterback whose throwing arm was still the stuff of barbershop legend, and Sarah Miller, the homecoming queen, who had aged into a terrifyingly competent junior league president and boutique owner. They were the heartbeat of Briarwood, the golden couple. When the coroner's van backed into the driveway, crushing the pristine beds of winter pansies, the whisper went through the crowd like wind through dead leaves. It wasn't a robbery. It wasn't a fire. "I heard gunshots," whispered Linda Gable, who lived 2 doors down. 3 of them. Pop, pop, and then a pause, and then one last pop. By morning, the news had shattered the town's carefully constructed reality. Brandon Miller was dead in the master bedroom. Sarah Miller was in the ICU, catatonic and covered in blood that wasn't hers. The initial police report was simple, a narrative as old as time, a domestic dispute, a crime of passion, a wife pushed too far by a cheating husband, defending herself. But in Briarwood, nothing is ever as clean as the white linens Sarah Miller hung on her line. To understand the blood on the Ralph Lauren sheets, you have to go back to 1979. If you walked the halls of Briarwood High in the late 70s, you couldn't breathe without inhaling the exhaust of Brandon and Sarah. They weren't just dating, they were an institution. Brandon was 6 feet 2 inches, with hair the color of wheat and a smile that could get him out of a speeding ticket or into any college in the state. He was the kind of boy who held doors open and said, "Yes, Mom," masking a fierce, competitive drive that bordered on predatory on the field. Sarah was his inevitable counterpart. She wasn't just pretty, she was organized. She was the valedictorian, the head cheerleader, the girl who kept a color-coded Filofax before personal organizers were a trend. She didn't just love Brandon, she managed him. She ensured his jersey was clean, his homework was done, often by her, and his social standing remained unblemished. "They were terrifying," recalls Mark Halloway, a former classmate, not because they were mean, but because they were so finished. At 17, they looked like they were ready for a pension plan and a country club membership. They had the next 50 years mapped out. They married 4 years later, right after college, UGA for both, naturally. The wedding was the social event of the decade. The Briarwood Gazette ran a 4-page spread. For 15 years, the script held. Brandon took over his father's custom home building business, turning it into a regional empire. Sarah opened Weeks, The Gilded Lily, a high-end interior design and lifestyle boutique that sold $40 potpourri and the promise of a perfect life. They had 3 children, Liam, 16, Noah, 14, and Harper, 10, blonde, athletic, polite. The Miller Christmas card was the gold standard against which all other Briarwood families measured their worth. But perfection is a heavy coat to wear in the Georgia heat. The trouble, according to friends, started quietly around 1996. It wasn't shouting matches in the driveway or drunken scenes at the country club. The Millers were too disciplined for that. The decay was internal. The housing market had wobbled. Lumber prices fluctuated. Brandon's company, Miller Custom Homes, was overextended on a new development called The Sanctuary. He was stressed, working late, drinking scotch in his study until 2 a.m. The easy smile was replaced by a tight, grey exhaustion. Sarah, conversely, ramped up the perfection. Her appearances in the society pages became manic. She joined 3 more committees. She renovated their kitchen for the 3rd time. She was gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles were white, said Jessica Vance, Sarah's former assistant at the boutique. If a shipment was late, she'd lock herself in the office and scream into a pillow, then come out fixing her hair like nothing happened. She kept saying, "We have to maintain the standard. Perception is reality." Then came the rumors. In small towns, rumors are currency, and inflation was high. The whisper was that Brandon was stepping out. There was a new architect at his firm, Elena, 26, sharp, with dark eyes and a messy, artistic vibe that was the antithesis of Sarah's starched perfection. Brandon and Elena were seen at lunch. They were seen inspecting job sites late in the evening. Sarah never acknowledged it. Not publicly, but the town noticed the changes. She lost weight. She started showing up to school events with dark circles masked by layers of foundation. She stopped hosting the monthly book club. On October 30th, 1998, 2 weeks before the murder, a public incident finally occurred. At the Briarwood Halloween Fall Festival, Brandon was seen arguing with Eleanor near the hayride. It was heated. Brandon looked desperate. Eleanor looked furious. Sarah was 50 yards away, manning the apple cider booth, smiling a smile that didn't reach her eyes, watching them like a hawk. A neighbor, Karen Pruitt, overheard Sarah on a payphone near the concessions later that night. She was gripping the receiver. Karen told police later. She said, "I built him. I built this life. I will burn it down before I let some architectural harlot take it from me." The narrative was set. The scorned wife, the cheating husband, the younger mistress, the pressure cooker was whistling. The 911 call came in at 11:42 p.m. to the Briarwood dispatcher. The voice was Sarah's, but it was unrecognizable, guttural, shattered, hyperventilating. "Please, God, he's crazy. He's got the gun. There was a sound of a struggle, a crash of glass, and then the line went dead. When Officer Miller, no relation, kicked in the front door 12 minutes later, the house was silent. He found the children locked in the upstairs den, terrified, but unharmed. Liam, the oldest, was holding a baseball bat. "Mum and Dad were fighting," he told the officer. "Dad was yelling about leaving. Then we heard the shots." In the master bedroom, the scene was horrific. Brandon lay on his back near the walk-in closet. He had been shot twice in the chest and once in the neck with his own .38 caliber revolver, which lay on the floor near his hand. Sarah was huddled in the corner near the vanity, rocking back and forth. Her silk nightgown was soaked in blood. She had bruises blossoming on her arms and a laceration on her cheekbone, consistent with a backhand strike. "He tried to kill me," she whispered to the EMTs. "He said if he couldn't have the new life, He'd end this one. We struggled for the gun. It went off. The forensic evidence seemed to line up. Powder burns. Brandon had powder residue on his right hand, suggesting a struggle over the weapon. Trajectory. The shots were close range, consistent with a grapple. Physical abuse. Sarah's injuries were fresh and defensive. Motive. A suitcase was found half-packed on the bed. Brandon's suitcase. He was leaving. The town rallied instantly. The narrative was tragic but understandable. Brandon, the golden boy, had snapped under financial pressure and the weight of his infidelity. He tried to leave, things got violent, and Sarah, the mother lion, defended herself. "She's a hero," the local pastor said at the vigil. "She survived a nightmare." For 3 days that was the story, a tragic, twisting true crime tale of a high school romance gone wrong. Then, Detective Silas Thorne got the records. Detective Thorne was a transplant from Atlanta. He didn't care about homecoming queens or state championships. He cared about data. "The timeline bothered me," Thorne said in an interview years later. "The 9/11 call was at 11:42 p.m. The neighbors heard the shots at 11:35 p.m. That's a 7-minute gap. What happens in 7 minutes?" Thorne pulled the phone bills and credit card statements. Exhibit A. The pager police found a shattered Motorola pager in the bottom of the trash compactor in the garage. The lab managed to retrieve the last few messages stored on the device's simple memory. For 3 months, Brandon had been receiving numeric codes and short text messages. 911, emergency, 143, I love you, or so it seemed. "Call me now." The pager was registered to a P.O. box in the next county. The billing address for that P.O. box? It traced back to a prepaid money order purchased by Sarah Miller. Exhibit B. The affair. Thorne interviewed Elena, the suspected mistress. She was bewildered and heartbroken, but not for the reason they thought. "We weren't sleeping together," Elena told Thorne, weeping. "We were planning an intervention." Brandon hadn't been cheating. He had been seeing a psychiatrist in Atlanta for severe depression. He was $2 million in debt, hiding it from Sarah, and the pressure was killing him. Elena, who had gone through similar financial ruin, was the only person he felt he could talk to without judgment. The argument at the Halloween festival. Elena was begging him to tell Sarah the truth about the money. Brandon was terrified Sarah would leave him if she knew they were broke. Exhibit C. The library records. Thorne checked the Briarwood Public Library records. Sarah hadn't checked out a book in years, but 2 weeks prior, she had used her card at a branch 3 towns over. The books she checked out were chilling in their practicality: forensic science for the layman, ballistics and you, the physiology of trauma. She hadn't returned them. Police found them in the trunk of her car, hidden under the spare tire. Marked passages included sections on GSR, gunshot residue, transfer, and staging a struggle. Thorne realized the twist wasn't that Brandon was a monster. The twist was that Brandon was a man in pain, and Sarah was a woman who realized her perfect life was an insolvent lie. The police recreated the night of November 14th based on the new evidence. 11 p.m. Brandon finally confesses. He is packing a bag, not to run away with a mistress, but to go stay at a hotel because the bank is foreclosing on the house the next week. The secret is out. The money is gone. The image is shattered. 11:15 p.m. Sarah realizes that once he leaves that room, the town will know. The golden couple will be destitute. The shame is unbearable for her. A divorce due to bankruptcy? Impossible. A widow of a tragic, abusive husband? That she could play. That role had dignity. 11:30 p.m. Sarah retrieves the gun from the nightstand. She isn't afraid. She is calculating. 11:35 p.m. She shoots Brandon. Here is the true horror. The first shot hit his shoulder. He fell. According to blood spatter analysis, Brandon didn't attack her. He crawled backward, confused, pleading. The second shot hit his chest. The third shot, the pause the neighbor heard, was the execution. 11:36 p.m. to 11:41 p.m., the timeline where the scene was set. Sarah didn't dial 911. She staged the evidence. She manipulated Brandon's hand, rubbing his palm against her face to mimic contact. She placed the gun in his grip, firing into the bed to plant residue. Then, the physical toll. Standing before the wardrobe mirror, she attacked herself. A closed fist to the face. 1 hit, 2 hits, skin split open, nightgown torn, the rug scuffed, a perfect simulation of self-defense. 11:42 p.m. She composed herself, took a breath, and dialed 911, pitching her voice into the register of a terrified victim. The trial of Sarah Miller was the highest-rated event on court TV that year. The prosecution painted a picture of a narcissist so consumed by her own reflection that she would rather murder her husband than admit to being poor. She didn't kill him because she loved him too much. She killed him because he had become a liability to her brand. The defense tried to pivot back to the emotional abuse angle, but the pager records were damning. Sarah had been paging Brandon repeatedly with cryptic, stressful messages to drive up his anxiety, setting the stage for his eventual removal. When the verdict, guilty of malice murder, was read, Sarah didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply smoothed the front of her blazer, checked her reflection in the glass partition, and nodded once. She is currently serving life without parole at the Pulaski State Prison. In a letter to her children, who were sent to live with Brandon's sister, she didn't apologize for the murder. Instead, she wrote, "I hope you are keeping your grades up. People are watching. Don't let them see you sweat. Appearance is everything." The house on Sycamore Ridge sits empty now. The bank foreclosed, just as Brandon feared. The grass is overgrown and the paint is peeling. But if you drive by at twilight, you can still see the spot on the porch where they took the Christmas photos, the perfect couple frozen in a lie, smiling until the very end. As we conclude, we thank you for listening. We appreciate you for liking, and please make sure to subscribe to Frightening True Crimes so that you'll be alerted to our next video posting. It truly helps us grow and provide more tantalizing stories for you. Till then, stay spooky.